for joining. My name is Dav. I'm an experience designer. I've designed all kinds of things from museums to spaceship to health stuff for blind people to feature films and games. But we're not here to talk about me. I'm not the expert today. Today, we're going to do something really different. And it's an experiment. It might be, there might be failures. It might be a little bit awkward. So just bear with me. But I think it's going to be fun no matter what. And so me and Josh got together recently. I've been coming to Future Spaces. At first, I just came to watch a friend present, and then I was like, wow, next week looks really interesting, and the week after looks really interesting, and I've pretty much been a regular every week. And so me and Josh were talking about it, and we were saying, every week Josh finds someone that's smart, accomplished, and interesting to present their work or what they're thinking about or whatever. And but I really think about this group as an of, by, and for group, of, by, and for creatives who are smart, accomplished, and interesting. And so me and Josh were talking about it, and we were talking about how like there's a spotlight on one person every week. And so we were thinking, well, what if we just turned off the spotlight and flipped on the house lights and let everybody in on the conversation and see what happens? And so we thought that we gave birth to this thing called Hack Chat. And basically, we were thinking, AI is new to all of us. All of us are using AI in ways. And I don't know about you, but I've been experimenting and playing, but I am so curious about what other people like me are doing with AI. And I know that I could learn a lot from them. So we thought, what better excuse to get everyone together and to pass the mic around to everyone than to do a thing around a hack chat where we all share what we're thinking about AI and what we're doing and that kind of stuff. So today, you are the expert. We're all the expert. I'm not presenting. I'm just kind of facilitating the conversation. So before we start, I'm just going to ask you, I think maybe it's already happened, but I believe, has everyone got their video turned on? Basically, it's hard to have a conversation with people when you can't even see their face. It's like impossible. All right, there we go. I want to see a quorum. Oh my God, now it looks like there's actually people in the room. Look what happens when you turn on the lights. I love it. So thanks. So please do turn off your video if you go to the bathroom. But if you leave it off for a long period of time, what are we going to be thinking about you? So please leave it on. And we'll do that. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so today I have a rough structure. We can go off script if we want, but like today we have this progression. We're going to start with a softball and then kind of move into harder balls. Start with tools, go into fears, go into hopes and dreams, and then we're going to end on the last question, which I'm going to save to the last. But to start out, we're going to be using the chat heavily, so open it up. I'm doing that right now. Where's my chat? So what I want you to answer real quick, what's the last thing you did with AI? That could be in the last 5 minutes, it could be in the last day, it could be something fun, it could be something boring, whatever. And I'm going to try and figure out where my chat is. Here we go. All right, human vidvid. And you guys, and here's the other thing about this one. I'm not like super Zoom style. I'm not a great, super technical host. We don't have to be super polite here. There's not that, I mean, it's a friendly group. So just kind of call it out. Someone helped to draft a proposal, use ChatGPT to help me with my 11-year-old science class, right? Very good. What are some AI failures? Like, did this work? Did it work? Also, if anybody wants to just turn on their mic and start talking, just please do. I can always turn off your mic, so don't worry about interrupting. Using Sora to, let's see, still image, identify a font. Did that work? I want to hear about a failure. What failed on AI in your last thing? Someone just kind of blurt
Dev,
it out.
I'm gonna jump in, even though they are
Thank
two
you.
for me, just because I had my 12-year-old son volunteered me to do AI backdrops for Beauty and the Beast production at his middle school, and they're like, And like, I don't know how to do that. So I was in there with like a whole bunch of like a very, very demanding middle school director. And like trying desperately in MidJourney to get all of the different scenes to look the same. So we could project them. Um,
And work? No?
some of them worked great. So actually, if anybody knows Hassan Ragab, who did some workshops for Future Spaces, who's a friend of mine, and he also did a talk, and he's like kind of a semi-famous AI artist. He's meeting with me on Monday to bail me out because I'm just like so freaked. But like it was not doing it. It was very, very temperamental.
All right. Well, anyone else before we move on? I want to hear anyone had a
Oh,
failure, an AI
I
failure.
I had one recently. I was introduced to Dolly 3, and essentially I was trying to get like some brainstorming for like just revamping my portfolio, and I deliberately asked not for orange, and it was just every shade of orange, and it just didn't matter. It really didn't matter. So they decided I was gonna be orange that day.
Yeah. My AI failure was that I asked the chat a few AIs to make a spreadsheet for me and to organize it in this way, and they all very confidently talked about how they were going to do it and gave me all these options, and then none of them did it. It was such a bummer, so I need to figure that out. Okay, next question. One word to describe how I feel about AI right now is, put it in the chat. Mine, one of my favorite English words is happy, sad. So mine is excited, overwhelmed. Apocalyptic, mixed, trepidation, conflicted, uh, politicized, interesting, effortful, interesting. It should make things easier, shouldn't it? Hyped, suspicious, helpful, optimistic, cautious, hopefully stoked, fearful, neither, intrigued, hesitant, curious, misunderstood, cautiously optimistic, excited, and dangerous. Yes. Supercilious. What does supercilious mean, Paul?
Sorry, I was on mute. I like it has this thing like it feels like it's superior, really because it's so damn smart, but it's not. So it's a fascinating thing. It doesn't.
It's kind of
It's like a
stupid smart.
friend, like yeah, like stupid smart, like a friend who they always have an answer to something, and you're like, but look at the context.
Underwhelmed. Untrustworthy.
You would call it
Approachable. Interesting.
lies confidently when it doesn't know the answer, and it lies
Totally.
with the exact same confidence that it tells the truth, which is problematic, as
It
we know.
is so confident, and it's so erroneously confident sometimes. Right on. Promising. Okay, let's keep moving. Okay, we're gonna get into tool time. So using the chat. And so we're starting out softball, and we're gonna get to the big question at the end. My favorite AI chat box is what and why? I might not have gotten them all there, put it in there. Oh my God, the death of creativity and the human spirit. Molly, can you just talk us through that one while people are talking about their AI chatbot?
I don't want to harsh anyone's vibe. I just I think it's more complicated, and I'm sort of I think for small scale things, for personal things, it can be fun to experiment with. But I don't think tools are used at that scale. I think these tools are going to be scaled in a way that essentially for folks in this call, right, who may have been established in creative spaces for a long time, we had ladders to climb to get here. And I think those ladders are being pulled up. I think they're being destroyed by the fact that you're not going to have a production artist. You're not going to have a junior designer because these things are going to get farmed out to our senior designers who are going to farm it out to our AIs. So I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe, but I do have sincere concerns with what it's going to do to creativity, both in a unstructured and an organized way.
Molly,
Yeah.
what do you mean by ladders?
Well, what do you do?
Well, I work on the future of entertainment tech. Are you
And
talking about apprenticeships?
I think there's a lot of different ways that we climb in our careers. And I think a lot of those early steps are important for us to learn the norms, the mores, the pitfalls and landmines that are associated with what it means to be like a professional creative. And also just to get practice being bad, right? Get practice making mistakes and doing bad shit and getting critique and feedback. And I think the more that we outsource the responsibility to do those things, the fewer opportunities we have to grow. Individually, this is something we can surmount, right? But I think when you scale this across an entire industry, that's what starts to worry me. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Philip.
Well, it does. And I don't know, Dav, do you want to have a discussion?
Yeah, let's have it. That's what it's all about. Let's see how this
Okay,
works.
so in response to that, I would say, think of this as possibly, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm playing devil's advocate, which is that this can be a whole new tool and a whole new situation. Just like if I were an oil painter, I don't have to make my own paints. I'm happy with that. An organization, you're streamlining processes. The downside is you don't know how those decisions are being made. You don't know if it's lying to you. You don't know if it's being polluted by hallucinations. But I totally agree. You want to be able to make mistakes, but it may be the mistakes now are at the AI level as opposed to the human level.
Yeah, I think like a couple examples come to mind. One, I'm fortunately shy from an age perspective of having the chance to mess around with, which is Letraset, right? And just like what DIY typography actually looked like and the control that people had over that. And you look at it now and you're like, well, digital typography gives you so much more power and control. But I do think there's value to that. On the other hand, I mentioned earlier, I'm doing rotoscoping in After Effects. Now, rotoscoping is an extremely tedious and time-intensive task that employed hundreds of people to do something that may not have been very creatively fulfilling for them, like, let's face it, right? And so I'm not against the idea of AI when it's used to accelerate things, tedious tasks, even though I recognize that has an impact, right? Like on people getting into the space. So I think it's more complicated than that, but I think it depends on how it's used and when it's used and who it's used by.
Yeah, and I
Margaret?
can add rotoscoping is a creative act.
It
And you're
is.
basically outsourcing the creativity to the AI, assuming it's not a creative act.
Let's get Margaret. Margaret, I want to just note that you've raised your hand. Everybody gets to be able to do that, and you get rewarded by
Gold
having them.
star, great. I think I'm somewhere in the middle in this conversation as far as I was very resistant and ignorant, and still am very ignorant about AI. I think to some extent all of us are. But as far as like entering a space of being idealistic about craftsmanship and just having probably like an unrealistic worship value of things being done by hand. Like I'm a crafter at heart. Like you will see me with yarn like all the time. But that all to say, one of the concerns that comes across is if we're not participating in it, then we're not able to basically give this opportunity to expand everybody's voice. So specifically, AI currently, the images that we're receiving are going to feel generic because it's not getting enough input. So even on a historical basis, if you have like an 18th century scene of whatever and you're telling it to make that, it's going to be very inaccurate between the props they're using or any of those images because it's not informed versus if we had people that are again skeptical and thinking critical and how can we make this the best, and you have artists and designers caring about the products and the end thing, then we'll get it closer to being right and we won't have these like generic images. It'll feel more authentic because there's still a human interaction. There is still like to some extent supervision and just democratizing everyone's voice and access, I think, is something that is underappreciated. And I'm still new at this. I'm not sure how I'm going to integrate it in my own art practice, but I would imagine that, again, if we're not putting our say in it, we're going to let it take over us. We're going to just surrender to it. And that's maybe not the healthiest for everyone's mental stability. So, yeah.
Rui, is that how do you pronounce your name?
Perfectly. Rui, you got it. Um, yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Margaret was saying, from a little bit of a different perspective, which I think, there's this excitement and dangerous tension. And I think, one thing that I've been, and piggyback also on your earlier question of the error, hallucinations and how, I think, based on what, piggybacking on Margaret said, we also have the opportunity to, feed and teach the machine. And that's also very interesting. And then I think there's also with the hallucination, an opportunity. We need to know what we're talking about, so it's fact checked, so it's correct. And from an artistic perspective, I think it's a different approach, and I think it's super interesting as an opportunity to learn and really know, because this AI is super referential. So you need to know the references to pull it, to push it, right? So I think it's an opportunity to learning and also to expand.
Right on. All right. Anybody else? Yeah, Josh.
I was just gonna say I think it's very early to know. Like I was actually having a conversation with someone from Weta yesterday, the Peter Jackson's special effects company out in New Zealand, and they're gonna come speak at a future Spaces. But what's interesting is Weta has decided not to use AI at all in any of their
Wow.
special effects works. Like it's just a conscious decision that they made. And they have like tons of training data and tons of ways they could use it, but they just made the decision. They're like, look, we're known for craft. We're known for a certain level of craft. This is how we do it. This is how we're going to continue to do it. And they use it on the tooling side, but they're not using Gen AI for creating creatures or environments or things like that.
Well,
So
the elephant in the room is, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
Kevin Bailey with the movie Here, I think he has got the most sane approach to a proper way of integrating Gen AI into really difficult and precise image generation.
Yeah, that's because it's an aging. He's aging, and he's using the actors that he's also paying. In other words, yeah.
And it couldn't do the work unless they'd used Gen AI. It was just way too much.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I think it's going to be a lot of different, I just don't think we're going to resolve on sort of like one thing, there's going to be a lot of,
Sure.
there's still going to be a lot of space for craft, I think, in the future.
So was the primary reason that Weta isn't going to use AI because of the craft thing, or was there also like a legal thing or something like that? Because I would imagine I was talking to a friend in film this week who was saying that basically they use it only for like quick iteration and explorations. And then because they can't use anything because they're doing movie stuff, so like posters or trailers or anything, if it's AI, they can't be in the final. So they can't use it for any final stuff there. So they're only using it to accelerate their. And so I'm kind of curious, like one of the questions that I had in here was, here, I'll just jam over to it. I typically use AI to start something or finish something. Is that relevant? Like, so throw it into the chat, start blabbing. You can just raise your hand. Kind of curious, like how are you using it? So I see a start, finish, finish, start. So let's hear from somebody who's using it to start. Why start? And why not finish? Anybody.
It's not a good writer, for instance. I work with a ton of writers, and it's a solid C+ to B- writer. And it's like, thank you, I'll take it back from you now, is usually the point I reach. It's great though to start. Give me 10 headlines or 10 descriptions of this, and then you can build on it. But it doesn't have finished quality. I want to reference back to some of the things Molly brought up as well. I think that for me, the sort of singularity point or disaster point will be when we look at AI now. It's built on a ton of craftspeople who did hundreds and hundreds of years of work, and so AI is really good because it's like, oh, I'm going to look back at what Michelangelo did and what Da Vinci did, and I'm going to build something for you, and it's going to be awesome-ish. And you're like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's when it starts referencing back to itself, because there are no more craftspeople to reference back to. And I'm pretty sure we've already passed that point, right? You definitely see it in writing and in online ads. And you see it popping up from time to time. You're like, why does this paragraph suck? And you realize, oh, an AI wrote it inspired by AI, as opposed to an AI looked at Charles Bukowski and then made a funny ad out of that. It's just not capable, or it won't be capable in the future, of referencing back to real people. And then it's going to just develop its own visual and actual language, and it'll just start talking to itself. And you also see that happening. That's what search engine optimization was. It was AIs talking to AIs and content farms and shit like that. So
well, the people that fear AI, creatives, are the ones that dislike the notion in AI you can say, write me a paragraph in the style of, which they say is completely ripping off somebody, but what I, as an artist, call inspiration from other artists, which is essential part of doing anything creative. So
Christopher, with your hand.
Yes, AI I teach my students, and I do myself, is a conversation, not a vending machine. And so I start creativity with conversation. And if no one's around, AI is perfect. And the issue is I am having a conversation with humanity because it's scraping all of humanity off the website. So, that's a pretty open kind of conversation. So, it's not a vending machine. That's what kills me.
Yeah, what's a vending machine?
A vending
What do you
machine, you
mean?
prompt it and you get your result.
Yeah, I
Your
see. So it's
prompt
not a
engineer, if
finishing.
you will.
So it's a
Yeah.
starter then, in other words.
I'm the starter and I'm the ender. It's a
Right.
conversation.
And it kind of helps in the middle. Right on. That's cool.
yeah.
I like that. Craig.
Yeah, I think two things that I've seen that are relatively new realizations, although I think they're not new to the AI community. When you look at what people like Fei Li have done, who created ImageNet, and now she's got this physical world startup that actually has AI taking live things out from the real world as opposed to only the internet. I do think then there is this possibility of expanding the ability with new types of models to truly synthesize and maybe even come up with new ideas because you remove the constraint of a limited data set from limited but growing, but you opened it up to the real world. And then we also have people finally combining, making hybrid AI models where you combine generative with neurosymbolic or some other kind of physical model representation that anchors generative in physical properties that are actually informed properly or anatomical properties. So I think once we get those, I think are some really important advancements that will surprise us in terms of it truly coming up with something that is new because it wasn't done by somebody. It's sitting out in the real world, and AI can take it and say, oh, well, I want to try to do something with this that's just generating off of properties, not off of data, text, images that have been fed into the internet.
Nice. Skylar, Rui, we'll get back to you, but Skylar hasn't talked yet.
This is just it's kind of tangential, but we've been working with some film studios to use comfy UI workflows with previs, and it was interesting. One of the directors was saying how like previs is the point at which you want to have the most primitive representation of an idea because it allows everyone to imagine like their own interpretation of how, the blocking of a shot, and you don't have to get fixated on the wrong details. You're kind of establishing this like baseline architecture. And so in that way, it's a kind of the reverse, and AI is more useful to add the details in later and more helpful in the more post-production or later stages of the process because it just distracts everyone if you use it in the earlier stages of previs. So it was interesting.
Yeah. So, and just to get a finisher in here, yeah, it seems like there's a lot of starters. Any finishers that want to talk about like why they finish? Is it editorial? Is it refinement? Is it like, is any fears around that finishing? Anything?
I'm a start middle.
You're a middle.
I'm a start and a middle.
A start and a middle, but not a finisher.
Sometimes a little kind of touching there, but not yet there yet.
So what's it going to take to get to finishing, I guess, is the question.
Well, so let me tell you my case. Right now, I use it as a start to create mood boards and for pitches, for project pitches. And so helps us a lot to be, more lean and then bring in a concept artist at a later time when we already have a stronger idea of what we want. And then, middle two, because a lot of times we create prototypes for those pitches, and creating assets has been a really helpful arm. I'm personally not I'm a terrible 3D modeler. I'm not even a 3D modeler. It's just a waste of time to me to be in front of a 3D modeling program. But, I don't need to always call my 3D artist these days to like, oh, build me a ray gun or, or a chair, I could, yes, get assets, but sometimes I can actually just, go from a 2D asset to a 3D asset in a couple of minutes and have something I can use for the prototype that's, visually and, dimensionally good enough to demo. But not finished. I would never use that as a finish. So to get there, it needs to be, for me, it needs to be a human because there's a lot of like the craft that is missing. I think that's what's missing with the craft.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of never finishing. So Kate says, I use it to start something, never to finish anything. And I just wanted to throw out this little anecdote. When my mother was a caterer and she would make bread, and she would make like 30 loaves at a time. And I don't know if you've ever kneaded one loaf of bread, but try kneading 30 of them. It was insane. But we had a giant mixer, and she would use the giant mixer, professional mixer. And I was like, Mom, why are you kneading it with by hand? And she's like, punching it and slamming it and everything and like throwing it on the counter. And she's like, because it's not going to taste as good unless you beat a little bit of leaven into it. And and she did that all the time. She never cut that corner. And I always think about that. And so, Kate, why never to finish? And will you ever finish anything with AI?
It's super hard for me to imagine finishing anything in AI ever. And I think it has to do with a comment that Molly made early on, which is that, boy, I've climbed a lot of ladders, and all those ladders have taught me discernment. It's helping me understand how to think critically around what is good, what is bad, how to respond to a product. If I think about all the teams that I've led and supervised, it's always been about generate, but then ultimately discern. And so it's hard for me to imagine, after all that hard work, just handing discernment, which is, I think, what bringing something to final really is all about, to an AI. It's part of me thinks, well, then maybe it's an existential question for me, but I actually think it's why humans are important, ultimately. I love it. I love the notion of AI for generating, for divergence, for propagating all sorts of things I might not have thought of, for getting me out of these sort of frozen states because I'm new or at something or because I'm blocked around something. But I really struggle to imagine it being a replacement for my ability to ultimately judge and think critically about what's needed the most.
Have you ever, I love this concept of discernment. Have you ever been tempted to finish because the discernment felt better or right? The
No.
AI discernment.
No.
Haven't gotten there yet. Haven't seen it yet.
Haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Let's move on. Okay. It's time to get into our polls. My polls totally failed. I was so excited to do a poll, and now I know why I've never done one and will never do one again, because it totally failed. So I threw this in from my poll. We're getting to the fears section. I'm most worried about creatives being ripped off by big tech, industry, or even national shakeups, like just shit kind of falling apart or being shaken up or thrown out, losing my job, humans becoming irrelevant, human survival, or I'm not worried, it's just another tool. Start going into the chat. Raise your hand. Somebody can start talking now. Humans become meat products. The environmental, creative diminishment.
Space.
Yeah, talking,
So,
go for it.
I mean, the thing that I'm not worried, well, yeah, sort of worried about is I have an agency, and I have, a lot of designers and developers that, I have a lot of personal affinity for and are very talented. They do a lot of code and design, and I'm wanting to know how disruptive this is going to be for them. And if someone else could, we've been coding out massive sites and massive things, and if that stuff all gets very, very commoditized, it's going to be disruptive, and I'm going to have to figure out how to keep everyone employed gainfully, and what do we look like? So, I mean, we used to be a flash shop, so I'm used to pivoting, but I don't know, a little bit of pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. This dysregulation, God, this is going so fast, I can't read it. Okay, children's use and brain develop and the unknown future overall. I think the child thing is really interesting. Earlier when Molly was talking about, all these hours that we've built up, Ezra Klein talks about, one of the questions I have is what are we going to lose with AI? And he talks about the empty page or the empty canvas, and how and I would say boredom, actually. Like, I think boredom is really critical. I think the empty page and the empty canvas, because they're really hard to deal with. And I think, like, when things move so fast, I wonder about the younger generation that hasn't had 10,000 hours yet in their life to achieve some kind of mastery. If the whole concept of like 10,000 hours is just like going to become impossible because we don't have 10,000 hours anymore. Molly, to you. Thanks for raising your hand.
I think it's kind of like moving off of that, right, to the idea of, I think what I wrote was the decay of art into content. And earlier I talked about like good enough being, I think, like a sincere problem, because from us to good enough now, that's good. But from good enough then to good enough 2 years from then will be worse. And as these replicas get worse and worse, and they deteriorate from one generation to the next, because I mean, you don't even have to go 10 years now. Generations used to be 20 years, right? But now they're like 10, they're 5. They're like 2 years basically before someone has completely forgotten the stuff that happened before that. And I think as people get used to content for the sake of content, the value and the quality of that stuff just diminishes progressively. And I worry, primarily, that's like a big thing that I'm worried about, is like creativity is not important anymore. I don't need to be creative. I have a tool that will be creative for me. That was like 5 points. But anyway.
Right on. John.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Molly, I think something that Kate said. I mean, I'm really concerned, about, all of us have had a history of problem solving. We've been developing our creative process over years, if not decades. But when you're talking about new generations who are using AI from the get-go, I mean, what's going to be in place for them to do exactly what Molly was talking about here, develop a thought process, what's going to happen in their brains and the neural networks that are going to be forming. I think a really obvious, analogy here is what happened with GPS and map reading. A lot of people simply, not only can't read a map, can't orient themselves in space in ways we used to be able to do before there was GPS. And imagine that happening across the board with every kind of thought process, problem solving kind of question you come across. So our perspective is we already know how to problem solve. We've already developed the framework for that. But what happens these young people? Will they have an opportunity to do that? And that's my question.
Josh.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I have like 3 young kids, and like I have a 12-year-old son, and like the problems that he's tackling and the creative opportunities that he can have are like really exciting to me. Because like for me, like I was just like I want to be a comic book artist. I was like drawing. It was like really labor intensive. Like he's like designing Roblox skins and game worlds, and like I think in some ways it's like, as certain problems get solved, you get bigger and bigger problems. I mean, like, I don't know, like, like the world is filled with problems. I don't think we're gonna run out of problems. Like that's not my fear. Maybe I even take a little bit of comfort that there's a lot of problems, Bring back the mammoths. That's what I want.
Bring back the what?
I want to bring back woolly mammoths.
Yeah.
Dude, fix ecosystems. Like there's big problems to solve. Like we don't need to be doing kerning all day long. All day
Fair
long.
enough.
Do it for fun.
Oh. Phil.
Yeah, but in response to Josh, your kids are being creative within the boundaries of the tools they're using, and someone is defining those tools. So the question we face as AI moves forward is the more it tells us what we can do and the more it doesn't tell us what we might want to do but haven't thought about, the more narrow our creativity can become.
Repeat that last line one more time. The more.
Okay, AI doesn't tell you what it's not telling you. AI may know things outside the bounds of what it's telling you, but it's tailoring its response based on what it thinks you want to hear, as well as what it thinks might be true or what its algorithm is pointing you towards. If I want to be creative, say I want to do a news article on current events, it is filtering in some way what information I am getting, leaving things out, My point is, we don't know what it's leaving out, just as when you go into Roblox, you don't know what's beyond the controls that you're allowed to use for your creativity. And that, to me, is the biggest danger going forward. Someone is developing the algorithm. The algorithm may be trying to please me or maybe trying to control me. Either way, we don't know what it is not showing us.
Yep. Yep. Noam. Did I pronounce your name correctly? How do you say your name?
Yeah, you actually did. I thought you were going to say Noam, but Noam is the correct way. I wanted to say something that kind of like connects all the last things that were mentioned. Also, Josh, you said that you see how your children, they actually are able to solve more complex problems, maybe even faster. You know, it's like, I'm sure that's very impressive. I know I've been working with kids and what they're saying and what they know is just mind-blowing. And I think that it kind of like brings us to this question of what worries us, because when we think of what worries us, we really focus only on the AI and what it's going to be capable of and where it's going to lead us. And I feel like sometimes in this conversation, we kind of neglect the part of the human development and the human intelligence. And obviously, there's so much neuroscience research that needs to be done. I'm sure it's starting now in all kinds of ways to explore creativity and language development and the cognitive processes, and it's going to take time to really see the impact, obviously, because these things take time, especially if we think about things like developmental brain development and everything. But I think we should really start exploring ourselves more, even each one of us, kind of like to do this self-experiment and to see where it takes us when we use it. How do we think differently? How do we use language differently? How are we able to imagine things in a bigger scale, just different? And then, yeah, to include that in the equation of where AI is going to take us, because, you know, ... but also where are we going to take ourselves? So, and I'm loving this whole conversation.
Right on. That's a great segue to a question that's coming up. But in the meantime, Robin, what you got?
I mean, I think a lot about decision making, and I get excited about if AI is with a group of people and is invited in to part of that conversation to get people to a different place. I get concerned when I think about it's always me, one human, harnessing AI, because humans don't like to be uncomfortable. They don't like to be challenged. And so naturally, I may not actually get to a place where I'm harnessing AI, that's pushing me to a different place or challenging my idea. And I can see people making very important decisions without being challenged and thinking that they're convinced that they have all the information. And I guess those are my excitements and fears.
Yeah. Right on. Well, here's a quickie. Are you most excited about like going further faster or about doing things that you can't do? Kind of that 10,000 hours, because you've already spent your 10,000 hours on something else. Where are you at? Doing things can't do. Doing things can't do. Learning, doing things can't do. Superpowers, totally. I'm using it for productivity right now, but want to start moving into learning, right? Done bigger things with less resources. Yeah. Okay, so here's a question. What do you want to learn? What would you like? Let's dream a little bit. Like, what are the things that you want to do with AI that you haven't yet done or can't yet do? Or what are your hopes? This is the hopes part, the dream. Getting to the grind pieces faster so I can get to the big thinking. Oh my God, yes. I've tried that so many times. And I feel like the thing that's super tedious is kind of also hard to get it to do. Watching other people play, solving the big problems. Yeah, I wonder if we might just be able to start to change the scope and the scale of the things, the problems that we can tackle. Oh, interrogating experts alive or dead, right? That I just watched an interview between David Lynch and Cher, who that never happened. I don't know if you guys saw that. There's a whole series of these interviews between people that have never met. And it's really compelling. I mean, it's fun to watch, but yeah, that's a dream of mine too. Raise your hand or start talking if you're find a husband. Yeah. Um, yeah. Or maybe find an AI for a husband. I don't know. Okay. Zane, what talk to us.
Hey there. Great to see you, and thanks for hosting the conversation in such a nice way. So I think maybe this mushes up a bunch of the topics that you introduced. As you were asking about just this last question, like where in a way, where are we? I'm reminded of like how early we are in this whole journey, right? I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard the phrase that gets repeated often about it's never going to be this bad, right? I think that's meaning the rate of change and the rate of improvement happening so fast, like just over the last 18 months, like it's never going to be this bad. At the same time, I think we're in if we compare this to the web era, like in the introduction of the web, I think we're pre-app server. Like we're in the stage of this when it's like everyone thought the web was literally like making HTML documents and putting them out there, and then, some like people like Yahoo cataloging them. We didn't, we weren't even yet at the point of a native web inventions or reality, like a web crawler for search engines, or websites being entirely dynamic. And I know those are strange analogies, but I just think it's that raw where we're at right now. And a team of people like this, or a group of people like this, are great at, I think, thinking what it might be. And so I'd love to hear from other people about like what are some of the unique characteristics from these early explorations that might be ingredients in that kind of future transformational applications of things. And of course, at the same time, acknowledging the climate disaster around us, and this only accelerating that, right? Those are deeply terrifying realities. But I'm just like, I see something in being able to have a conversation with a carrier of conventional wisdom around something that is beautiful to me. And it touches a lot of your other, I'm sorry if I'm not being terribly coherent. I think it touches on a lot of your other questions, like how do you use it? Well, it's this kind of great starting point. And what's good about it? Well, it kind of captures, someone had said humanity, but it's really more conventional wisdom, right? Like, and this a way of communicating and getting something started. I don't know. I maybe that triggers some thoughts for people, but like, what are the special things you're seeing that might open the door to this, like, post web server realization of AI?
I don't know if this is directly addressing your question, but you asked something earlier that got me thinking about something that struck me, right? Which is, I think if you use AI critically, right? You evaluate the result and then you measure that against the things that you understand. I think it can become a very useful tool, specifically because of the things people are talking about, like collective consciousness. Well, this is a representation of humanity as aggregated, kind of amalgamated, and then sent back to you. I feel like it's kind of like looking at yourself in a mirror and seeing an alien. I think it's interesting to see the differences between how computers perceive us and perceive the world around us versus the way we have grown up to perceive the differences between ourselves, right? Just how a computer cannot understand the difference between different types of people, different types of facial features, and all of the patterns and all of, I guess, like the rules that seem innate to us, recognizing that they're malleable, that they're actually something that can be created. We have our own set of rules. The computer has its set of rules that are, of course, programmed by us. And I think the awareness, right, of the fact that those things are changeable is incredibly valuable. But that's obviously like it's a pretty complicated way to use AI, right? So I think it's interesting from a a philosophical perspective, but maybe not the most practical way of using it.
Yeah. I'm gonna raise my hand. The collective consciousness and preserving indigenous traditions, something I was thinking about is that like I kind of always imagined that artificial life would be more interesting and get there sooner than artificial intelligence, and artificial life being something that's like net new, like a new way of existing, as opposed to AI, which is kind of looking backwards, right? It's always looking backwards. And artificial life, it feels like it's kind of looking forward. And so I'm really curious about this like endless regurgitation. But a mirror is kind of a dumb way to look at ourselves, right? Like you were just, Molly, you were just saying. And I wonder if AI can ever get to the point where it's coming up with something net new from all the regurgitation of all of its knowledge about where we've been, but like I'm kind of interested in it totally net new. I think this is but what you were talking about made me think of this, the last question, which I'm gonna jump to because we are running out of time. And my tech optimist hypothesis is that if all new tech helps us to better understand what it means to be human, then the question is, what is AI beginning to reveal to you about human creativity in particular? And so like I was just thinking about like painting, for example, like it felt like for thousands of years from cave paintings to, you know, Rembrandt and beyond, we were kind of like on this asymptotic journey towards realism in painting. And then right as realism was we were about to cross the finish line, suddenly photography just comes out of nowhere and passes us and like gets across the finish line right before us. And it feels like photography is very analogous to AI in the sense that like we used to have to draw a sketch and then shading and then color and then blah, 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 blah. And suddenly photography is like, I just did it all in one thing and it's just as hard. I can make a sketch just as fast as I can make a photo reel, right? And so, but then if we think about photography, what photography did for painting and apply that to now, I wonder if we would have ever gotten to Picasso and Jackson Pollock had it not been for photography, because we would have just kept on that like asymptotic journey to realism. And so this is what I mean about like, I think what AI did photography, as soon as it like won the race and was like, sorry, Charlie, I just beat you. We're like, okay, well, we lost that race. So now the painters are like, well, now what are we going to do? And they ended up figuring it out. And it was fucking beautiful. And it was very, very human. And it was, and it got really extreme and embodied in Jackson Pollock as an example. So what are you beginning to see and perceive as what is really truly human now that a machine can do so much that we thought a machine could never do?
I got a comment on that on social media. I grew a beard last year. I thought that was really crazy. I grew a beard and it was a silver beard. And I looked at myself and I thought I look exactly like if I'd Instagram filtered myself. And it's like we've told Instagram what good is, and then Instagram has ripped through it and told us back what it is. And if you have daughters, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's this recursive echo chamber that destroys people. And worse than cigarettes. Absolutely, we live through that. And that I think is the most scariest AI thing, is that it's basically farming us the way corn farms us. If you've ever heard that corn is farming people, not people farming corn. Corn forces us to create it for no reason and no health benefit, just to exist. And that's basically what AI is doing. It's just farming us to look a certain way, to act a certain way. And we're just at the precipice of falling off of that finally, but it's there. And it's pretty freaking scary.
Yeah, Paul.
Oh, I love this conversation so much. I just wanted to add that I remember back in the early 90s, Jaron Lanier talking about and doing a lot of experimenting in VR, and people were like, won't people go into VR and never want to come back? And I think about that with AI, and he's like, I think the most profound thing is after being in VR to come out of it and experience the real world and experience the kind of extraordinary thing that human perception and being alive on the planet is. And I feel that way with AI. Like it's in contrast to birth, copulation, and death that we have as humans, that AI doesn't experience. And so we'll always have this, our mortality as this ability to be really human and connect on a human level. That
I was going to say hugging and kissing.
yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some AI sex before long. Michelle, you said the democracy of creativity can create amazing moments. And so wait, is AI democratizing creativity? Or like, I just kind of want to hear more about that.
Oh, it was Laura, Michelle's sister.
Oh, okay.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, I was just saying that like with something like TikTok, for instance, it used to be that doing dance videos and lip syncs and all of that content creation was limited to those who had video editing skills. And then you have this advancement and more tools and more people creating content. Well, there's pros and cons to it. There's also a lot of amazing things that come from that. And AI will enable more people to spell out their dreams and journeys and adventures in ways that they wouldn't otherwise be able to.
Yeah, extended capabilities. Someone said earlier on to another question, sincerity is most important. If you can fake that, you have made it. And so I love this idea about sincerity, and I wonder, like, there is so much about AI. You can kind of smell AI sometimes, you know what I mean? And it's an ineffable, to me, it feels kind of ineffable. Like what sincerity is kind of an ineffable human thing. Maybe AI will help us to articulate what sincerity really is, you know? But I'm just curious, the person who said was talking about sincerity, or anybody else, like, um, how will we tell sincerity or humanness? I think sincerity is another way of saying like it's sincerely human.
That's a quote from
that-
Hollywood, by the way.
From who?
From Hollywood. Sincerity is most important. If you can fake that, you haven't made. That's a Hollywood tradition.
I see. Like you haven't made, meaning you're a great actor. Is that?
Well, it's a matter of, there's a lack of sincerity out there, and that doesn't stop anybody. And kind of goes to what my mother said, never, never underestimate the power of mediocrity. And that's what that sincerity, the lack of original minds, come to, but it still makes a lot of money. So
let's close out with Margaret and Kate.
I would just like to add that maybe AI is not achievable at like discerning sincerity, but obviously being convincing is really where it's at. So it's gonna be almost like the Turing test, except for it's almost like how educated you are around AI is your level of discernment and your reliance on whether you can detect sincerity or basically distinguish anything. So that goes back to being informed. And if we're able to democratize early, a lot of populations that have been underrepresented, undersupported early on, they're not going to get pulled into this mix and continue in a trajectory that's always been. And that's, I think, where I'm most optimistic. If we are all like a little bit more like on board just a little bit earlier on, hopefully we can all have a say in this. And that's what's exciting for me.
Kate, you want to take us out?
Yeah, I mean, this relates a bit to what I said in the chat, but also to some other comments that were just made, which is that this idea that we are as concerned with the creator behind the art as we are the art itself. And it's why people diverge so much around, well, can you like a piece of art if you hate the artist? Or why we get so upset if we learn that the artist that we thought created the work turned out to not be that artist at all. That they were sort of guising themselves as something and writing from an authentic place that we mistook. And so it just occurs to me that this is really where the rub is around authenticity or sincerity, is that if we are as obsessed with the creator as we are with the creation, and the creator is now AI, what will we then think of the creation? And I wonder, because I think I'm as curious about the people creating art in AI, for example, as I am the art itself. It's really, I think, Laura, to your point, it's the getting a window into what they wanted to make that interests me, not the thing that they actually made.
Yeah, that's like getting at the sincerity. Thank you. We would love feedback, and not really the good feedback, but the critical feedback. Want this to be better. Like, A, did this work? Do you like it? What about the format worked? The polls clearly did not work. But anyway, we can do more of this, and we can do all kinds of things, and we have lots of ideas about what to do, but we would love to, we love your feedback. So thank you so much for coming, and please stay in touch, and we hope to see you again